Okay, if you don't mind, I'd like us to talk about consciousness again. Today was an exceptionally wonderful day, thanks to a young American from California with whom I was able to have two and a half, well, for the second and a half time, have some fantastic conversations. In our last conversation, these were recorded, so I'm also publishing these in case it's just part of the historical record. So the last time so basically we met when I was interviewing people. I interviewed him about the mind and stuff. And, this might be a guy who knows he's a brain. This might be a guy who knows he's not reasonable. So when we got together again, we talked about consciousness the last time we got together. And he mentioned this thing called, I've opened the wrong thing, this thing called illusionism. No, he mentioned functionalism, which may be sort of the same. I don't know. But a way of thinking about the mind as being that consciousness is sort of the sum of its. I don't know that I want to try to say what functionalism was, but I remember going, yeah, that's what I'm saying. But in case it wasn't what I say, okay. So he sent me this article by Keith Frankish. Right, you're looking at a screenshot now of the first page. Illusionism is a theory of consciousness. All right. Here's what I'm going to do in this video. You can read ahead and not listen to me if you want. I'm going to read through this. I'm going to tell you that I sent this to my dad as part of our conversation about consciousness. I understand the illusion of consciousness. I'm also a human brain. So this brain, I am also having this sense of being this I. And of having this special awareness and experience and maybe even control. That, I am choosing my words or some bullshit. Okay. What I would love, Father, is for you to understand what it could mean to be, that it be an illusion. Then let's talk about it. In my previous video, and this video is kind of a repetition, so it's late for that warning. In a previous video, I talked about how people love to talk about quantum mechanics for God and consciousness as a way to explain all these fantastic things that we are programmed to believe. I also said that I don't think that the question that people are asking about consciousness, I don't think that we're going to have an answer that satisfies them. I think in a previous video on consciousness, I said, this was in the last, it's like 4 videos. It was like, they're like 3 BonCons. I talked about like consciousness being this like little guy who's like in there, and there's like the brain stuff happening, and there's this like little guy like experiencing it or something, and like pulling the strings maybe or something. I don't know. And we're not going to find that. We're not going to find, like, I say that sounds like a bold statement. We're not going to find this like extra entity, I don't think, that sort of makes intuitive sense of your conscious experience. We cannot use language and intuition, language now as it is, and just like intuition to understand consciousness. There's some things we just gotta be like, all right, that makes no sense to me, but that's what the evidence indicates. So, for instance, consciousness, it kind of makes no sense to me. I've been thinking about the mind for a long time, and to really start to be saying that consciousness is an illusion, that's recent. It doesn't make intuitive sense. But also, I feel like I'm at the point where my intuition is okay with the sense that it does make, which is just like, yeah, activity in the brain is experienced by the brain. Some of the activity, unity, we've talked about all the cross-modality and all that stuff. Okay. So here's what I want to say today. We basically, what brings those two things maybe together with, anyway, is that I think that we're asking a magical question, and we will only be satisfied by a magical explanation or an anthropomorphic explanation where we just add another cell. So it's like, oh, how does the brain consciousness? Oh, okay, well, there's another little guy in there. And then is he conscious? I don't know. It's the same thing with God, right? Okay, you have a God. Then, of course, yeah, you can define that God as being the beginning. That can just be included in the definition, and then, all right, you're right. I can't follow up with, yeah, but what created him? Okay. And maybe it'll be like that with these fantasy consciousness things, that it's like there is a primary, there's like an individual in here, like a consciousness that is engaging with the brain. And then if I ask you, well, how does his consciousness work? Maybe you'll say, oh, no, he's not like a person. He just looks like a person for it to intuitively sing for me. But no. Part of his definition is that, no, he is just consciousness. So he doesn't himself have mechanisms. Consciousness doesn't have mechanisms? I don't know how you don't even try to make it make sense, but you remain convinced that it makes sense in your head. And I don't think it does. Anyway, so quantum mechanics satisfies. If you're asking a magical question, oh, there's this magical consciousness thing. Well, what is it? And then you come up, you have words like quantum mechanics. In 2023, that's basically magic. Okay? Or you can call energy, right? Energy is a really common one. Oh, we're energy. Just make it like, use like a non-magic term, but have it play the role of magic, of just being like an ambiguous thing that, because it's not understood, we accept it as an explanation. I don't know. I didn't finish that sentence well, but I think you understand what I'm saying. You ask someone, what does that mean? We're energy. And like, we're vibing and like our energies are interacting. What does that mean? Oh, well, it's like energy, And just because we can't really imagine energy except for like colors, maybe aura or something, because we feel intuitively the unimaginable part of electricity and energy, then we accept. Our intuition is happy to accept that word. We have no follow-up questions. Yeah, energy is like something that I don't really understand. Yeah, okay. And it's the same thing with quantum mechanics. I mean, of course, this baby of a thing, quantum mechanics, is now being used to just explain all these fantasies. Okay. Whew. All right, so I send to Father illusion as a theory of consciousness, Keith Frankish, and I say to him, maybe this phrases it better than I did. What I was really thinking is, maybe because it's like typed in this font and it looks like it's like, an article, maybe you'll take it more seriously. Okay. So if you already read it, then, I don't know, go pee. Theories of consciousness typically address the hard problem. They accept that phenomenal consciousness is real and aim to explain how it comes to exist. There is, however, another approach, which holds that phenomenal consciousness is an illusion and aims to explain why it seems to exist. We might call this eliminativism about phenomenal consciousness. The term is not ideal, however, suggesting as it does that belief in phenomenal consciousness is simply a theoretical error. That rejection of phenomenal realism is part of a wider rejection of folk psychology, and that there's no role at all for talk of phenomenal properties, claims that are not essential to the approach. Oh, and those claims are not essential to the approach. Another label is irrealism, but that too has unwanted connotations. Illusions themselves are real and may have considerable power. I propose illusionism as a more accurate and inclusive name, and I shall refer to the problem of explaining why experiences seem to have phenomenal properties as the illusion problem. So, me and Franklish, me and Frank. So, I don't know whether you read it. I mean, no, obviously I love you. Don't be silly. So I have to exit out of this. So then his response was I don't know when my Franklish article is written, so I'm not going to talk about it. See, we're so unreasonable. But look, there was a mechanism. I was about to tell you the date because the date's not exactly flattering. And then luckily, because I know how the brain is, because I know how I am, there was another mechanism that was triggered by my wanting to say the date that went, wait, hey, was the date mentioned for the other one? And it wasn't. So I don't even know the date for the other one. I can't believe it's before this one. All right, let's look it up. Not that, and again, that's kind of a fallacy itself, that just because of the date. And look at this guy. This guy's young. This guy wasn't even born when this other article was written. All right, maybe he was. He posted on Twitter, if electrons don't exist, does that mean that positrons do? Sorry, I'm tired and can't help it. Oh, sorry, I'm tired and can't help it. Frankish. Oh, gosh, I want to do this quickly for you. I do. Illusionism is a theory of consciousness. I mean, come on. Oh yeah, but maybe years don't matter. Often they do in science, but maybe that's silly of me to think that an article written about proton tunneling in DNA and its biological implications. Again, also, who are we to say? I don't even know quantum biology. This has led to the. Let me screenshot this for you. Oh, let me highlight it. We're in the. All right, I can't highlight for some reason. We're in the first paragraph, more than halfway in. This has led to the opening of a new field, which has been called All right, we should read it. All right, let's read the first paragraph. We read the first paragraph of the other one. Today, there seems to be little doubt that many of the fundamental biochemical processes in the living systems are directly connected with the transfer of electrons and protons. Since these are fundamental particles which do not obey the laws of classical physics, but the laws of modern quantum chemistry, the electronic and protonic. I feel bad about calling it a baby because I think of quantum mechanics and research and thinking of that as being more recent than it actually is. Maybe it has a little bit more history than I gave it credit for. Where were we? But the laws of modern quantum chemistry, the electronic and protonic structure of biologically interesting molecules and systems has to be treated by quantum chemistry. This has led to the opening of a new field, which has been called submolecular biology or quantum biology. The principles of quantum mechanics are of fundamental importance not only in treating the ground state and excited states of the biologically interesting molecules, but also in connection with the problems of energy storage and the transfer of energy. All right. I wasn't reading it well. Let's not let the fluency heuristic, compel us to think that, because that's what's happening with me right now. Just because the other one's easier to read doesn't mean it's truer. Or easier for, a lay person. Because here I am a lay person. So maybe, you know what? Hey, if you can explain consciousness, and it's like an entity, and it's like a whatever, with quantum mechanics, and how consciousness is actually like inside of the cells or whatever, it's not about networks and cognitive processes, it's like subatomic cognitive processes. If you want to do that, do that. I'm playing my part, and I can't play this part because I don't know what the fuck they're talking about. I don't know things about states. Okay? And electrons and all that stuff. All I know is obvious stuff. Like the illusion of consciousness. It is obvious when you... Okay. All right. So let's see what the deal is. So let's go to the conversation. I said, this is like what you're working on. Like this is what you're like reading. I didn't know whether it had anything to do with the consciousness thing. I just saw the title and responded. He said, hi. Oh, we'll do the French accent. No, that's not right. Just watched a good lecture on how life takes advantage of quantum mechanics to carry out its processes. He entitizes everything life takes advantage of. And I do think that, I know It's maybe just a way of speaking, but I do think that it messes with the way we think about things when our thoughts are incorrect and anthropomorphizing or entitizing things that don't need to be entitized. Entize maybe isn't a word, but to make into an entity, to claim as an entity, to, all right. So how life takes advantage of quantum mechanics. Because he also would talk about evolution as though it's this intelligent process. And I know you're watching this and you're thinking, that's just a way of saying it, that, and then the genome needed to find a new way, and so it developed this trait. But I think it is important to be constantly reminding ourselves, because it's so intuitive to think of it that way, to be constantly reminding ourselves that there are no objectives in evolution. It's just how the cookie crumbles. There's not a force mother. Well, sort of. There are the natural, but not an anyway. All right. Hi, just watched a good lecture on how life takes advantage of quantum mechanics to carry out its processes. In the case of proton tunneling within DNA, a system has evolved to minimize the likelihood that proton tunneling will lead to greater incidence of mutations. I said, oh, wow. He said, the big question is, what does quantum mechanics have to do with creating the sense of consciousness? Wait a minute. The sense of consciousness? Why do you need quantum mechanics for that? Brain networks, by the way. All right. Again, this is cheating, because just because a person is mentioned in the article doesn't mean that some other thing that the person said undermines this article. But I will tell you anyway. Francis Crick. We got a lot of Franks in the game. Francis Crick said, and I have a video on this where I talked about it. It's not him saying it. But it was like one of the last things he said, like before he died. He goes to V.S. Ramachandran, who we love, who we talked about here, who wrote the 2005 A Brief Tour of Human Consciousness, says to him, I think that the trick, the clue, the key, the something might be in the claustrum. So this thin sheet of cells that in the brain that receive signals, unlike most areas, which just receive signals from here and here, the claustrum receives signals from almost every other area of the brain. And so that could be how we have this singular conscious experience from that unification. Okay? I was thrilled when you got to read that. Watch that video. All right, but that doesn't undermine. I'm sorry. And I left it in, but we'll pretend like we're in a courtroom with magical, rational humans and just strike it from the record. That's so stupid, isn't it? Oh my gosh. So anyway, but the sense of consciousness, we can biologically on systems, some great scale bigger than quantum mechanics, we could explain consciousness. Like, why isn't my dad running away with the claustrum thing? Okay, great. So there's these cells where a bunch of activity from the brain comes together. Okay, so then activity here, that's like, I guess that doesn't, but it won't satisfy you if your question is magic. If you're not satisfied by the claustrum explanation, look, we don't have the data, the experimentation to demonstrate that the claustrum is what is creating the sense of consciousness. But what are we talking about quantum mechanics for when that's on the table? If V.S. Ramachandran and Francis Crick say something, doesn't mean it's true, but it means that's the meal. That's the meal. What are we doing talking about quantum mechanics? Because that doesn't satisfy us, because we need a magic answer to the magic question. All right, let's see what he said, because he said more while we were recording. But no, wait. So I read that as creating consciousness or the entity of consciousness. But so I'm confused now. So Dad, let me know. So why wouldn't, if you don't look to quantum mechanics for math to say, how does the brain do math? Oh, I wonder how quantum mechanics might explain that. We don't do that, right? So and there's a whole vision, basically every mental thing every mental thing, my dad is, except for maybe decision making, is prepared to be like, yes. I mean, yeah, he would. Anyway, all right. Yeah, brain networks, and any of these traits, behaviors, whatever, can be explained by how the networks are connected and how the chemistry that they have. But consciousness is magical, so I need some more magical answer, I guess. But like literally, because I remember one time he said, and I talked to you about this message. He said, for instance, that I am conscious that I am typing this. But you can explain. You can, I mean, like, you can accept that there is a network that's controlling the thumb from the motor cortex, maybe through the cerebellum, maybe, and it's controlling the thumb. Okay. And maybe so you got the motor, you got the premotor cortex, maybe, which is part of the frontal lobe. You got Broca's area, which is, I think, part of the frontal lobe, temporal parietal gyrus. No, it's the frontal lobe, yes. And so you've got this speech activity. Then you've got your sort of executor, who's got some good connections in different places, shoots that over to the thumb, to the premotor cortex, which shoots it over to the thumb bit in the motor cortex, which shoots it down here, maybe gets refined a little bit in the cerebellum, and then you got muscle contractions, acetylcholine contracting some muscles. Okay, so he can do that. He knows that. The word, that there's a language system, that this Broca's area, maybe language is more than just Broca's area, maybe that's just speech production, but anyway, yeah, that there are these patterns, this grammar, there's this sort of concept in the brain that triggers this word. Okay. There's the ability, there's the visual. He can say, oh yeah, I am looking at the words being typed. He knows that that visual information is going to feed into other parts of the brain, which can comment on that happening. And I guess I think I messed up where I started it. But yeah. So we've got how the system could produce the words, could type the words, could have the words. The word exists biologically in us, consciousness, as sort of a, So I see how the system, I mean, ChatGPT can do it. ChatGPT could say something like that to me. And then what? You're like, yeah, but ChatGPT doesn't feel this way. What do you know? And if ChatGPT doesn't feel that way, what's got to do with quantum mechanics? We're brains. It's a completely different system. Okay, so then there's something in the biology. What's quantum mechanics have to do with it? In fact, wouldn't quantum mechanics be applicable not just to biology, but to... I'm stepping out of my... All right. These are some of the questions that we have. These are not... My dad's seeing these as all attacks and like how he's wrong. It's not what's happening. Really, these are questions. It seems absurd to me what he is saying, and these are some of the questions that I feel like are open and don't need to actually be open, don't need to be questions. I feel like there's a lot of inchoateness that we don't, there's a lot of incompleteness in this quantum mechanics thinking that we don't have in, for instance, the colostrum. So, I'm a little smart aleck. So I go, oh, ambitious. We don't know what quantum mechanics are or what consciousness is. Good luck. Then I was like, all right, I saw an article on consciousness, quantum mechanics, and emergence. We looked at it together. I didn't look at it. Then he said, that is the point of doing science. He got me with my ambitious comment. I said, true. And I got him back. I said, for some people, the point of doing / reading science is to prove their interior fantasies. And even in those cases, ambitious science and philosophy can be fruitful. But also, I feel like if we were in another context, Dad would be saying, like, why be so ambitious? Like, there are things that, like, we know now, and questions that are like just before us, let's like work on those. Why make a whole bunch of presuppositions to consider a question? Let's fill some of those presuppositions with some actual information. Then once we have that information, let's see where that leads. I feel like he would say something like that. I feel like you're watching this going, that's true. That's what I think, unless I've upset you. Why not respect whatever Thomas, whatever, his whole thing of how science goes, which is like we have some basic premises that we sort of accept, let's say at the first stage. We investigate, assuming those premises, we learn a bunch of stuff, and then at some point, we learn something that makes us change the premises, the axioms on which we had been working. And so now we move into chapter 2 with new premises. Then based on those premises, we're doing a bunch of work until we find something and we go, holy shit, we have to change our whole paradigm. We have to shift our paradigm now. Why don't we go that way? Why we gotta talk? All right. But even in those cases, it can be fruitful. Sometimes even by coincidence, we're motivated by this internal fantasy and we're digging. And if you're digging, you're digging. I mean, sometimes it's cool to be, digging where we've already found some good stuff. But hey, how did we find that first good stuff, right? So if you're digging, you're digging, and you might find something. So yeah. So even when it's absurd, you can find truth and realize it was never absurd, that the paradigm was wrong. Yes. All right. So here's what we haven't read yet. Here's what he says. The mechanism of how quantum properties come into play, rephotosynthesis, has been shown. Oh, okay. Excuse me. Okay. I love this. Okay, great. So we've already got some of this. And this old ass article proves that we've been talking about the role of quantum mechanics in, molecular systems on that scale. Okay. All right, let's read that again. The mechanism of how quantum properties come into play, rephotosynthesis, has been shown. All right, look, I don't want to undermine it. I accept this, and I also accept that it invalidates how reductive how much I denied there being stuff that this is based on. Okay. I do have a mechanism now going. All right, photosynthesis is about photo, which is like photons, which that's not triggering me. That's not choping me that be on the quantum scale and have quantum stuff. Then you've got the brain. Why aren't you using brain thinking mechanisms? No, I'm not saying why aren't you. No, stop it. Why aren't you using, for an explanation, the brain thinking mechanisms for consciousness? Isn't consciousness like a thinking thing, like a cognitive thing? All right, let's read on. The traditional view that quantum mechanic effects are only important at the very small level and has no impact on macro system is outdated. Okay. Ask your television, computer, phone, etc. Yeah, okay. Hear that? Because I guess... Wait, what? I thought quantum computers was like a thing in movies. Alright, so this is not my thing, and I'm trying to avoid pretending that it is. The hypothesis of quantum biologists is that life systems have evolved to take advantage of quantum properties and to mitigate the problems that they may cause. These mutations, maybe vis-a-vis mutations caused, or maybe you don't need vis-a-vis, maybe you can say this. These mutations caused by quantum tunneling within the DNA molecule. Okay. All right, Father. A lot of the things that were shaping me, there are words here that quelled them. I don't know, and I'm not in a position to understand the information that would quell them. So, I love this video. So after all of that, okay, cool. I do one of these, but stay over there. Because it does not work in my paradigm at all. And, alright, shit, I was born too late. Maybe I could have had a cool contribution 100 years ago. Maybe now this quantum stuff, you can be like, oh, okay, actually, blah, blah, blah. Okay, I don't have anything else to do. So, I'm just gonna keep going with Frankish over here. No, I just learned about Frankish today, so I'm gonna keep thinking of consciousness as a cognitive phenomena rather than a quantum. I mean, come on, it's just like Occam's razor, bro. But okay, I see no reason. Nothing occurs to me that to say like, oh no. So sure, okay. So if you're watching this and you were angry the whole time, not my dad, maybe my mom told him to turn it back on, because she had already seen the end. But if you're if person, whoever you are, if you're watching this and you don't maybe know much about psychology or biology, but you have a soul, and you've heard smart people talk about quantum mechanics, and so what? Ayers, why aren't you taking it more seriously? Quantum mechanics explains this thing. I don't remember what I was going to say to you. Okay. That's a whole nother track. So, that's a whole nother track. I just don't even think. That's all. So let's just work in parallel. And we'll check in on each other. I'll see how y'all are doing with the... But bro, can we go back? We're going to finish soon. Well, you can see how much is... Don't take my word for it, because I don't know. I mean, doesn't this is so stupid what I'm going to say, but it's totally natural. And so like all of our thoughts, so maybe you can relate to it. And maybe we can even figure out like what makes it stupid or where it comes from. Doesn't this Keith Frankish thing, doesn't it just seem like the superior position? He's like, theories of consciousness typically address the hard problem. They accept that phenomenal consciousness is real and aim to explain how it comes to exist. There is, however, another approach which holds that phenomenal consciousness is an illusion. And it just feels like the next step. It might be the wrong step, but it does feel like it's like, I think you feel me on that, maybe, or you can understand that feeling, even if that doesn't mean that this is right, and then the other thing is, I'm often interested by things that are counterintuitive, because I'm so committed to like what seems very obvious to me, that there were no real selective pressures to make us philosophers. So I'm not, I call myself a philosopher among humans. I am not a philosopher. I do not have real thinking abilities. We are just the first species to have them, basically. That's nothing compared to, what we're going to see down the road if the, planet survives, or what we might see on another planet. When Leo and I were talking, that's the California kid, when we were talking, he was he said to me something about how people will say that like ChatGPT is just a natural language system or whatever it's called, and it just like imitates, it just strings words together and blah blah. And and Leo, when he's telling me the story, is like he's saying to me, and then that I'm Leo. And then I was like, what do you think you're doing? That's what we're all doing. We're all just stringing words together, basically. So, oh man, he's got it. He's made it into my list of favorite. All right, we just got another message. Hey, we'll get to it. And then, so counterintuitive stuff I like because what's intuitive is like, yeah, of course, by definition, what's intuitive, of course the brain's going to come up with that. That's the sort of that's the intuitive, natural thing. That's the pre-programmed thing. Of course it's going to come up with that. And so we have a lot of really like intuitive beliefs that make a lot of sense. God, for instance, that makes so much sense. It makes zero sense, but it makes so much sense. There's a dude who was like, made it. And he made it because he could, right? Okay, and then he did that. That like makes sense, as long as you include the definition of omnipotence and all that, and chastise a little bit anybody who tries to understand the immense. It feels totally right and true. So then it's really interesting when we think that for thousands of years. As soon as we're able to think of concepts like that, we're thinking the concepts like that, and we're believing in concepts like that. That might not be true, but very early on, or at the beginning of modern man, I would guess we're praying. Okay, we're entitizing nature, anthropomorphizing nature. Okay, and then and another intuitive one, that this world we're looking out, we are in the center, and those things are away from the center and outside. Yeah, obviously the earth is fucking flat. Like, do you see a bend here? And what I would deal with intuitively, I'm not going to look through your silly machine. I think it was Galileo, he had some people look through his telescope as he was saying, what did he say? That it was heliocentric or whatever he said. I confused him and Copernicus. But, and people were like looking through his telescope and going, there's something just wrong with his telescope. All right, anyway, I didn't give enough of that story for it to be worth it. Sorry. Okay. I'm not going to do that now. So, what were we talking about? Counterintuitive. So, then, we have someone come along and goes, oh, hey, the earth might be round. What? That doesn't make any sense. What are you talking about, the earth is round? That doesn't make any sense. Yeah, the data indicates it. Well, that's really interesting. And really hard to believe in. So, of course, it's not going to be popular, that which isn't intuitive. So, for a long time, it wasn't. Now, there's a cultural pressure to believe in it. But there's now a reemergence of cultural pressure not in mainstream, but all around the fringes. There's more and more pressure because we're in the fringes, like, to see the truth that the mainstream doesn't see. So, the fact that most people know the earth is round, that's only because of social pressure. That's only because you will be laughed out of the room. And if you're a mainstream in-group person, you can't be laughed out of the room. Or that, you wouldn't want that. Same thing for being anti-racist. Okay. These are not like things like we really are. I am a flat earther, but I just have to put that aside and go, oh, okay. That's not true. Because they went up there and saw something else. And also, I've been in a place with my camper. I was across the channel from England. This was my first experience the first experience that I understood, demonstrated. I'm looking out and I can't see the cliffs of Dover, the white cliffs of Dover. So I'm in France looking across the channel at England. But I can't see the cliffs of Dover. And then I go to bed. So I'm like down. And I go up to bed, I look out my window and I could see them. That started to support, because I could see further beyond the horizon. The Earth might be round. I mean, I never considered flat Earth, but what I'm saying is intuitively, it works. So Earth being flat, Earth being in the center, there being some entity, anthropomorphic, who's basically like a human except not, who's like, yo, boom, 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 Earth. All of that makes sense. Consciousness that I am this thing, the soul, creation, evolution doesn't make intuitive sense, bro. Like, you can accept it because what we talked about earlier, where there are some things where your intuition, it makes intuitive, real evolution, I don't think makes intuitive sense. All right, let me say this. Sometimes when people talk about evolution that aren't necessarily like, that are into science, but not necessarily like, no, that's not even true. No, someone who just knows about evolution, who accepts it, but isn't at all into science, would intuitize, would anthropomorphize, would add all these intuitive elements to evolution. Such as what I was talking about earlier. There seems to be this intelligent force in the language my dad uses, or the language my dad uses evokes for me an intelligent force that is operating through evolution. And we use the word, for instance, why a lot. And I remember I had a biology teacher. I did not agree with her when she was first saying this. Then a few years later I did. I had a biology teacher who said, stop asking why about biology. Why is this like this? No, how? How did that happen? In some ways, why maybe can be used for shortcut. And like when you're asking why, it's saying, what is the natural selective? What is the pressure, the selective pressure from nature that made this advantageous? But we have to remind ourselves, it's not that like nature's like, here's what I need from you guys, so then we produce it. No. We're just like randomly producing things. And some of those things had children. Some people with those things had children, and some people with those things were having fewer children. So consciousness, I believed it my whole life. It was slowly not making sense. But free will since high school, I've been saying, what are you guys talking about? There's just like this first cause thing that's just pulling some strings. Obviously, every event has a preceding event. A preceding mechanical event. Oh, wait a minute. Maybe it has a preceding quantum event. Because quantum events, since they're so magical, probably exist outside of cause and effect, right? Quantum entanglement, all the way over there, there's no physical interaction, we're exactly in sync. Whoa. Okay. Sure. I don't know. But all right, we're gonna leave it here. Just what if this brain develops over time, and it's got all these amazing interpretive mechanisms interacting all these ways. Now, they're not amazing by the standards of philosophy, but they're amazing by the standards of like hunting and gathering and having social relationships in a community. Not, as long as the people look like you, of course. So really not at all an amazing brain for our circumstances, but when you have this thing, of course, one of the things that it's going to do is go, hey, I'm a thing. And intuitively, it will see itself as a thing, and it'll come up with this word, consciousness. Well, in some other language maybe, but... And then we'll borrow that and blah, blah, etymology, and then we have this word consciousness, and it matches our intuitive sense of self. Great. But then what's really interesting is, what if this fantasy that the brain has of itself, what if it isn't real? What if the brain's a brain? And all of it is a brain? Whoa. Now, that's something I think is really worth thinking about while we let the quantum mechanicists, do their thing. They did photosynthesis, awesome. DNA structuring, awesome. Let's, show me how quantum mechanics affects the trajectory of a baseball. Okay, now we've got a single macro object. Okay, awesome. Man, maybe we've already done that. Feel like I would have heard about it, but maybe you've already done that. Okay. Oh, well, neurons aren't as big as baseballs, so maybe that's not fair for me. Neurons are really quite smaller. And also they have electricals. But what does this have to do with cognition? What does this have to do with cognition, though? Okay, quantum mechanics definitely has an effect on neurons. Definitely, neurons are things, right? And quantum mechanics are the small level of things. Okay, neurons have quantum mechanic features and quantum mechanic events. Neurons are pretty small, and even, maybe it's just the neurotransmitters, which are even smaller, which are just molecules. So yes. Okay, great. So there is stuff to investigate about the atomic stuff about receptors. Well, we're pretty good with that. But let's get subatomic. Let's get quantum. All right, cool. What does that have to do with cognition, though? What does that have to do with consciousness, though? So anyway, this whole video, the point was to say, the whole reason, it was going to be like 2 minutes. I was just going to say, of course we love quantum mechanics because we have, it's kind of just a term. Kind of. Okay, maybe I'm being unfair. Yes, quantum mechanics is like a real thing. But there are a lot of things associated with it that are just terms. How about that? That don't make sense to us. And that feel magical, like quantum entanglement, for instance. And maybe string theory is now done, but string theory was something that did not make sense to us. So, what's my point? My point is that I don't understand I understand how a quantum event could ultimately lead to depression. Sure. There was some quantum event. Oh yeah, my point was that that quantum mechanics is a magical answer. Unless you are a quantum physicist, the term quantum mechanics is magic. In here for you. And okay, obviously there are some exceptions. Maybe the guy retired, spent 20 years reading in quantum mechanics. Isn't a quantum physicist, but okay. For most of us, for me at least, it's magic. Of course it's magic. Why else would we be relating it to consciousness? Literally, okay, so the point of the video was like, of course we would think of quantum mechanics because we're asking a magical question and that's the best magical answer of our current time. And then what was I going to say? I was going to say that. I was going to say something like that. I just don't understand how, even once we understand, let's say we understand quantum mechanics, like, oh, okay, and then this is how, and this has an effect on this. Okay. Where is consciousness? I mean, these people can't be complete morons who are writing this stuff, so I really have to just stop engaging with it. I'm not qualified. Just think the illusion thing. I guess you could say that intuitively the illusion thing makes sense. But it does now. Consciousness first made sense to me. I thought consciousness was, real. Bro, did you? Okay, we're gonna leave it on this. Did you see this quote? So you know James Randi is, right? He was like this guy who not ousted, who outed, who debunked, revealed, exposed a bunch of psychics and stuff, right? I don't remember when this was. Oh, okay. So there's quotes from '97. I thought it was earlier than that, and maybe it was. Maybe his fame was in the '70s. I don't know. Okay. So he knew all these tricks that people use in these things. He was always able to like prove, or not always, but I don't know, okay. And so I guess this is a quote about maybe like a psychic, because James Randi knew how to cold read someone, how to produce the same results as a psychic. And the psychic was like, oh, it's with the spirits. And James Randi was like, oh, but also I noticed this, that, and the other, and also probability, this. And so just went with that. But you're talking about how'd that happen? What are you talking about? And so, okay. So if he's doing it by divine means, I can only tell him this. Mr. Geller, you're doing it the hard way. So psychic readings and all that, okay? But also, if you're explaining something with divine means, you are doing it the hard way. And all right, I guess that's really unfair of me to say quantum mechanics is divine means, but this is definitely less divine. To think of it as an illusion, it's definitely less divine. There's definitely less magic involved. And then we just have to do the research. Like he says, explaining why it seems to exist. We don't have to look in magical places for this magical thing. We can go, why does that? It's like a bokeh in a photo, right? And it's, oh shit, is it really there? Is it not really there? It's not really there, right? There are photons going along, but there's not a specific ring of light here, and then no rings of light, and then a ring of light here, whatever the bokeh, So isn't an interesting question like, hey, how does that appear on a camera? Okay, it does exist. It is light. But I don't actually know about bokeh, so maybe this does work. But just isn't also, I mean, it's just, they are going too far. They are just taking it for granted that it exists. That this consciousness thing exists. Why can't we just say, all we know is that we feel like we're conscious? Why can't we just stay there for a little bit? We have the tools to investigate this in the brain. I think so. If that's our question, just why does it seem conscious, I think we can get to that answer. But if our question is, what is this magical thing of consciousness? We're just complicating things. But maybe just from the next chapter.